door just for now to because it might get real stuffy.
Are we able
We
to?
can obviously close it if it needs to be closed during the presentation. I'm thinking maybe it might not be a bad idea. It gets so sticky in here, you know?
Got the other one open too?
Yeah. You guys are going to dinner, right?
Yeah.
Good, I'm going. I started the our Peru program. So I'll just have my
You're taking down kids? And
Yeah, taking students down there 4 times. So I'm really very interested in hearing more about.
Do you get up to Machu Picchu and Cusco?
Yeah, it's 5 weeks in Cusco. Yeah, summer. So yeah, definitely.
And so these are, some of the kids may have gone, or some probably are going to go.
And there's 2 classes in here. There's Geography of Latin America, and then there's an Anthropology class, Indigenous South Americans. So that's going to be probably the majority of students. And there's 2 categories.
We are ready whenever you are.
Okay. Whenever Terry's around to introduce, or
I wonder if people will think it's Cal Poly time, which is 10 after. They'll wander in. Let him make that decision. I'm walking around here.
I'm going to take my jacket off as soon as I start.
Don't say anything about it not being a gay flag, or just leave, don't say anything at all.
Yeah, I don't say anything.
Yeah. Well, it's 6:33.
I'm going to make an announcement to everyone who's standing that we have an overflow room that they can get to.
Is it working?
Yeah, we have it streamed live right now.
Okay.
So it's all live right now. So I assume we're still live.
He says that it's working.
Excuse me, everybody. Everyone who's standing, we are streaming this right now. So if you don't have a place to sit, you can go to Building 10, room 126, and this will be streaming live on YouTube on Mustang News' website or source.
Are we ready to roll?
Just letting you guys know if you don't want to be in the aisles or anything.
Okay, we don't have that Terry. Not
There's 50 more seats over there. I sincerely apologize for the confusion. We actually set up another room with 50 more seats. But up until 10 seconds ago, the technology was failing us. And so rather than, you think we're a polytechnic, we're a brand new building, right? I just didn't think this was going to be an issue, but we had anticipated great interest. It's great to see you all. Thank you all for coming. And we had anticipated, we had an overflow room set up. We have the technology set up to stream live from here to there. But the streaming wasn't working up until 10 seconds ago. Apparently it is now, according to our technician. And so I'm getting lots of thumbs up. So you can go and witness it live there. Looks like we've got some people that don't want to stand.
So I think Dr. Lucas's class is going to that room, right?
Yeah, Dr. Lucas's class at a minimum is going to the other room.
So if you're my
You're all
class-
welcome to stay.
Yeah. If you're in my class, I prefer you stay. So I can get your attendance, unless you're in her class.
All right. With all those technological details behind us now, I want to welcome you again. Thanks for coming to our presentation this evening. I recognize that some people from off campus, thank you for joining us this evening. For those of you who don't know me, tonight's a night I don't really want to give my name out. But my name is Terry Jones. I'm the chair of the Social Sciences Department here at Cal Poly. And we're one of the sponsors for the presentation this evening, along with the History Department and the Latin American Studies minor. I do want to let you know that we will have one more archaeology presentation this year. We have a three-part lecture series for archaeology in this academic year, and on May 13th we're going to be having a presentation on Chaco Canyon. We have some scholars coming from Colorado to talk about Chaco Canyon. It's another of the world's most interesting archaeological sites. That said, our presentation this evening on the site of Machu Picchu, in my personal experience, Machu Picchu is arguably the most fascinating archaeological site in the New World, if not the entire world. Really, once you've had a presentation on Machu Picchu, it's all downhill from there.
Really?
Exactly. But we are very, very pleased that Dr. James Koos would join us this evening to deliver this presentation. Dr. Koos is currently a professor emeritus in geography at CSU Fresno. He received a BA in history, actually, from Western Reserve University. He's got a master's in geography from the University of Michigan, Michigan State University. And he received his PhD in 1972 from UCLA in geography. He is very much a specialist in Andean prehistory. He's particularly interested in the emergence of cities or civilizations in the Peruvian Andes, and his particular focus is on water control systems. He has published extensively in the scholarly literature on Peruvian archaeology, also in encyclopedias. He has actually visited the site of Machu Picchu close to 40 times in the last 40 years or so. Most recently, he has been involved, sort of in the background, if you will, consulting with Peruvian scholars about trying to get materials that were recovered by Yale University early in the 20th century to try to get those repatriated to Peru. But I don't want to steal any more of his thunder. That's part of his topic for tonight's presentation. But what I'd like to do to end my introductory comments here is I'd like to ask you all to join me in welcoming Dr. James Koos to Cal Poly.
Thank you, Terry. Before I start, there are two seats right here, and there's one right there, and I don't bite. So, is that good? Lights about good? And can you all hear me? This mic is only going to the other room and not helping out anything in here. Before I start, I'm going to advertise a bit. I've been doing this particular lecture for about 10 years for the Archaeological Institute of America. I've done it from Vancouver, British Columbia, to last February, a year ago February, in a blizzard in Toronto. I've done it from upstate New York to central Florida, and I've done it from Southern California and San Diego up to Washington and Oregon and so forth. So basically all over. And Archaeological Institute of America has sent me around for these talks, usually several times a year. In fact, next month I'll be at Cornell University. And so we're going to get a little bit of advertising for Archaeological Institute of America. If you're not familiar with it, it is the oldest archaeological organization in the United States, although it is mainly focused on the Old World and particularly Mediterranean archaeology. For those of you who are students, it does do several nice things. It has scholarships, and it provides probably the best list of summer field programs that anybody produces. You can check out their website for that. They have a number of publications. If you join, and actually if you contact me after the lecture, I can give you a code. Right now, this month, they have a $10 discount on membership special in the month of March. And for students, I think it's something like $40. You get the magazine, Archaeology Magazine, which is a very, very nice magazine. They also have a professional journal. You have to pay a little extra to get that. They've been working a lot with site preservation around the world, and they do travel. I have been doing Archaeological Institute of America tours for a number of years and have 2 tours this fall through them. Okay, this is a lecture called What's New at Machu Picchu? Before I start the lecture, though, I'm going to give a bit of an apology and tell you a quick reason why this lecture is not what I thought it was going to be. My wife is a specialist in autism and gave a lecture on Friday afternoon in Louisville, Kentucky. We flew to Louisville supposedly on Thursday, but because of problems, we didn't get there until noontime on Friday. We were there on Friday and Saturday and flying home on Sunday. My plan was to work on this PowerPoint and add some new videos from my most recent trips to Machu Picchu in October and November. I've been working on them last week, and all I needed to do was finish them up and stick them into the program. Well, some of you may have heard that there was a little bit of a storm in the Midwest, and instead of leaving Louisville, Kentucky a little afternoon on Sunday, we didn't leave until afternoon on Monday. We flew instead of Louisville, Dallas, Fresno, we flew Louisville, Chicago, Phoenix, Fresno, got in very late last night, got up late this morning, and did not spend any time this morning working on PowerPoint videos. So there are a couple of videos in this presentation, but they're not the ones I thought I was going to be able to add. I also put here the assistance of Mariana Mold de Piz. You'll see during the course of the video the PowerPoint, why Mariana Piz is an important part of this talk. And also, always my wife has helped out on this particular lecture. For those of you who are not familiar with where Cusco is, and Cusco is the starting point for going to Machu Picchu. It's in the south central Andes of Peru at an elevation of little under 11,000 feet. Here's a NASA image, and Cusco is right here, and Machu Picchu is up near the top. For going to Machu Picchu, usually you start at Cusco, and you go to Machu Picchu, which is up at the top of the slide, roughly 90 miles as the crow flies, but it isn't easy to get there as the crow flies. It used to be. We've taken, I think, 3 different times, took a helicopter to Machu Picchu, but you're no longer able to do that. So today what you do is either hike in or take the train. So it's a little bit more difficult, and it's not real quick and easy to get there. It's one of the more isolated sites in the world. In this image, Cusco is down here at the bottom, and Machu Picchu is there at the top. We're actually looking towards the north at the top of the screen. And again, roughly 90 miles from Cusco to Machu Picchu. This here to the east of Cusco is called the Urubamba Valley, and literally you go down the Urubamba Valley to get to Machu Picchu. Many people have the mistaken opinion or mistaken idea that Machu Picchu is up at the top of the mountain. If you start at Cusco at 11,000, it's got to be somewhere real high. But in point of fact, you're going down the valley, and the site's at about 7,000 foot elevation. Here's a little bit closer Google Earth image, and Machu Picchu is on a ridge with the river circling around it. Basically makes a U around the site. So there's Machu Picchu on this ridge. The starting point for going to Machu Picchu is usually a town called Aguascalientes, which is right there. On this one, there's Aguascalientes, and Machu Picchu is on the ridge above the river. Now, first of all, I'm going to take my jacket off because it's going to get warm in here already. And when we talk about Machu Picchu, we always have to start with Hiram Bingham. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Hiram Bingham and his background and how he happened to, quote unquote, discover Machu Picchu. Hiram Bingham had an interesting childhood. His parents were missionaries in the Pacific. His grandparents were among the first missionaries to Hawaii and were very successful. His parents had gone out to another set of islands, and I never remember exactly where, but I think Tonga, and they were not very successful. They came back to Honolulu and were kind of under the wing of his parents. As a young man, he wanted to get out of the Hawaiian Islands, and ultimately his parents and grandparents sent him to boarding school in New England and then on to Yale University. He then went to Harvard for a graduate degree, and when he was at Harvard, he did one of the most successful things that he did in his whole life. he married money. The heiress to the Tiffany fortune, Elfreda Mitchell. She was the granddaughter of the Tiffanys. And with the aid of the Mitchell money, the Tiffany money, he was able to have a pretty good career. Here he is with several of his sons. He ultimately had 5 sons. That's with the Mitchell in-laws and his wife. And here's the house that the Mitchells built for them. It was either the second or the third largest house in New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale is located. He became an adjunct professor at Yale. He never was a tenured professor there, but was doing reasonably well, but also was kind of restless and bored. And somewhere around 1906, he got himself appointed to a group of Americans going to a scientific congress in Santiago, Chile. And he got Harvard to sponsor him so that he could collect books for Harvard's library while he was down there. Now, in those days, you don't get on an airplane and fly down to South America. This is something where you go on a ship, and it's a multiple-month sort of deal. And while he was in South America on that particular trip for this scientific congress, he heard about the stories related to Manco Inca. Manco Inca was the last of the great Inca rulers. Pizarro had come to Peru in 1531, 1532. November 1532, he captures the Inca Atahualpa, ultimately has him executed. They put a puppet Inca into power, and that's Manco. And Manco is the Spanish puppet in Cusco in 1535, 3 years after the initial conquest. Manco decides the Spanish are not such nice guys as they made out to be, revolts. In 1535, 1536, there's a series of battles, and Manco ultimately flees to the jungle north of Cusco. There is supposedly a lost city of the Incas, the capital that Manco had set up, Vilcabamba or Vidcos. And the Spanish ultimately went out there. Manco had been killed, but one of his sons was then the last of the Incas and was ultimately captured, I think, around 1570, 1571 or so, by the Spanish, and that was the end of the rebellious Incas. But for roughly 40 years after the initial conquest in 1532, there was a rebel Inca state in the jungles north of Cusco. And Hiram Bingham had heard about this and wanted to go out and find it. So in 1911, he organizes an expedition of several of his buddies from Yale. It was sort of a self-funded expedition, and they went out looking for the lost city of the Incas. After the story of Machu Picchu is over, and we'll come back to Machu Picchu in a minute, during the First World War, he joined the Army Air Corps. He was actually second in charge of the Army Air Corps. Here he is as a colonel, and there he is in France on the right. He then used the fame he had from Machu Picchu, discovering Machu Picchu, and his First World War Air Corps service to get himself elected as governor of Connecticut. And while he was governor, he actually was running for a second term, and one of the senators from Connecticut died. Now, normally in those days, I don't know whether it's still true today, but the governor of Connecticut gets to appoint a new senator. And so the day after he was inaugurated for his second term, he resigned. The lieutenant governor became governor and appointed him to the U.S. Senate. So here we see Senator Bingham. He was famous related to air stuff. He was promoting aviation in the 1920s, and he actually landed this autogyro on the Capitol steps while he was senator. But also what happened while he was senator, some of you who are into history may know of the Teapot Dome scandal. You may have heard of that. It actually was related to something here in Kern County, California, southern end of the San Joaquin Valley, a set of naval oil reserves, and they were being leased out. All sorts of shenanigans were going on. During that Teapot Dome scandal, Hiram Bingham actually had on his Senate staff people from one of the oil companies. So it wasn't just that he was related to them, he was being paid off by them, and there was a whole series of things. He was one of the very few U.S. senators ever to have been sanctioned by the U.S. Senate, and he did not run for a full term, another full term. He had actually been elected for one full term, but never ran again. He sort of was rehabilitated in the Second World War when he was second in charge of U.S. Selective Service. And as a result of that, and here we see him as a senator, and there's Machu Picchu. As a result of that, he is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. You may be able to read it here. This is not Alfreda Mitchell that's buried with him. This is his second wife. Alfreda ran off with her piano teacher. Okay, Hiram Bingham produced several books on Machu Picchu. The first one in 1922 was called Inca Land, and then the last in 1948 is called Lost City of the Incas. Actually, the Lost City of Incas is still in press, and it has never been out of press. It has always been in press since 1948. In the first of those books, the statement here, and I'll read it for some of you in the back may not be able to read it, with the possible exception of one mining prospector, actually where the town of Aguascalientes is, near the site where all the hotels are and so forth, there was an American mining prospector working. No one in Cusco had seen the ruins of Machu Picchu or appreciated their importance. No one had any realization of what an extraordinary place lay on top of the ridge. It had never been visited by any of the planters of the lower Urubamba Valley, who annually passed over the road which winds through the canyon 2,000 feet below. Yeah. Okay. On my title, I mentioned, thanks to Mariana Moll-de-Piz. Mariana Moll-de-Piz was the associate director of a program I ran in Peru in the early 80s. And here's a photo of Mariana and her husband Franklin. Franklin was a professor at the Catholic University in Lima and was probably the best young historian in Peru in the 80s and 90s. Unfortunately, he died of pancreatic cancer in '99 at a young age. And here's Mariana more recently. In honor of her husband, who had died just a couple years ago, Mariana got interested in getting the stuff back from Yale. When Hiram Bingham finished his excavations at the site, and he excavated on 2 different seasons after the initial discovery in 1911, he took a fairly large amount of stuff to Yale. There are different stories of how much stuff, but anywhere from several dozen to more than 100 cases of things got taken. Ceramics, metal, bones, etc., taken off to Yale, with the promise that they would be returned to Peru within 18 months. And in 2000, and this book is dated 2003, they were still at Yale. And Mariana, in 2003, wrote the book that just showed you there, with the intent that she would campaign to get the stuff back from Yale University in time for the 2011 100th anniversary of the quote-unquote discovery. So she sends out this book. The title in English would be Machu Picchu and the Code of Ethics of the Society of American Archaeology, because according to the Code of Ethics of the Society of American Archaeology, you're supposed to return stuff to its origin. In that book, she published this map. And the map on the title there, it's in English would be Map of the Valleys of Parcaitambo, Lares, Ocobamba, and the Quebrada Vilcanota. In other words, the area around Machu Picchu. It was done by a German engineer, Hermann Göring, not the German World War II general Hermann Göring, but a guy in the 1870s. It was published in 1874, and Mariana found the map and published it in this book. Here's a close-up on the map. And can you see the writing there, Machu Picchu? 1874. Hiram Bingham says nobody knew about this place. Here's an 1874 map. Here's another map. This one is done by a French geographer, and the field work was done in the early 1870s. It was published in 1880. Here's a close-up on it. And can you see the name Machu Picchu, Huayna Picchu, and Inti Wattana, 3 names closely associated with the archaeological site. on a map from the 1870s, published in 1880. Nobody knew about the place.
Right.
Here's a land sale document. It's dated 1781, and can you read the name Machu Picchu? 1781. There is actually material from the early chronicles, from the first Spanish to arrive in the Cusco area, that talked about Machu Picchu. A late professor from Berkeley, John Rowe, and one of his students, Kitty Julene, found documents related to Machu Picchu from the 1500s. So Hiram Bingham didn't discover the place. Moreover, he knew it. This is a letter he wrote. It's dated May 17th, 1913. So 2 years, or almost 2 years after discovery, because he found it first in July of 1911. The letter is written to a man by the name of Giesecke. Giesecke is another interesting guy we should talk about momentarily. Giesecke was a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania who was sent down by the president of the University of Pennsylvania to help Peru organize their educational system around 1900. And he stayed, he liked Peru, he stayed there and became rector, the head of the university in Cusco, San Antonio Abad, still the main university in Cusco. Married a Peruvian, had a Peruvian family, actually was mayor twice of the city of Cusco. And in this letter, he's talking about that in the April 1913 issue of National Geographic, the story of Machu Picchu is going to be revealed to the world. Actually, that is the first time National Geographic ever used a full issue for one subject. Up to that time, they'd always had a bunch of little stories. This time, they devoted an entire issue to this one subject, Machu Picchu. And he's thanking Giesecke for help and so forth, and that they're going to send down the article. Here in this PS, the preliminary reports appear in the April number. It's gone to press. He's going to send it off down to Peru. And the most important and telling thing is here, the last sentence of the PS. There will, I fear, be some things in it which will not please them, referring to people in Cusco who read this article. When they see in Cusco that Hiram Bingham is claiming to discover Machu Picchu, they're going to know he's full of it. Because basically, they sent him there. There was graffiti at the site. There were 3 families living at the site. It wasn't that nobody had ever seen the place. It was known to the people in Cusco. They told him where to look for it. He actually went up to the site alone with actually one soldier went up with him, a sergeant went up with him. He has his other team stay down below and gives them other jobs that day so that he can discover it by himself. But that's Hiram Bingham and how he was. So let's go to Machu Picchu, and what I want to do here is run through a bunch of photos very, very quickly, just give you a sense of the site. One of the neat places to see the site is from the Sun Gate. If you're hiking on the Inca Trail, it's the first place where you get a view of Machu Picchu. It's on a saddle between 2 hills. The one in the background there is called Huayno Picchu, the young mountain. The one to the left is Machu Picchu Mountain. Here is from the top of Machu Picchu Mountain looking down. Again, the site is on a saddle with Huayno Picchu there in the background. There's a little bit closer view, telephoto view, looking down at the site. It's on this ridge between these 2 hills. This is taken from the top of Huayno Picchu Mountain looking back. Those last 2 photos were taken from up here at the top of Machu Picchu Mountain. I forgot to ask, has anybody been to Machu Picchu? A few people. Has anybody climbed Huayno Picchu Mountain? A few people. Have anybody climbed Machu Picchu Mountain? That's amazing. It is a tough climb. A couple of you raising your hand, how many hours? All day?
Well, we did like half of the trek, so we took a train halfway, so it's like a 2-day trek.
No, that's not it.
That's not the top of Machu Picchu Mountain. I'm talking is climbing to the top up there. Yeah, no, Huayno Picchu is easy. That's a couple hours. But
Yeah.
did you make it up to the top of Machu Picchu Mountain up there?
No, we stopped.
No. Yeah. I tried 3 times, made it once. My wife tried 3 times and just made it twice, and she's a hiker. But again, it's on a ridge between the two hills. This is from the top of Huayna Picchu. Machu Picchu mountain is there, is in the clouds. Every time you go, it's different. Different seasons of the year, different clouds, different sun. It is a spectacular place for photography. Looking off to the west, if you have a clear day, which is not very common, but if you do catch a clear day, there are snow-capped peaks. Actually, from the top of Machu Picchu mountain, you can see snow-capped peaks in all directions. But those are the Cordillera of Vilcabamba off to the west. Every time you go, it's different. And when you go, you stay there for a couple of hours and it's different from morning to afternoon and so forth. The light changes. If you just forget about it as an archaeological site, just as a place, as a site, it is fantastic.
What's the orientation?
You're looking basically towards the north on most of these. Huayna Picchu is to the north. One of the things you may notice is terraces. Lots of terraces. But not a lot, not enough to supply the food for the population. It's estimated now that there were only 200 or 300 people living at the site, and even though you see a lot of terraces, that's not enough land to support 200 or 300 people. One of the other things to point out with the terraces, all those terraces have constructions underground. The walls go down underground. In fact, well over half of the labor of the construction at Machu Picchu is not visible on the surface. They had to build up to be able to have some flat land on this ridge. Many of the terraces are higher than they are wide. It is not unusual for somebody who's walking around on a rainy day to slip, and it's roughly 1,000 feet down to the river below. They do lose several tourists every year. Again, here you can see very clearly that the terraces are higher than they are wide. Now, there's just a couple parts of the site that I want to talk about in some detail. The first is a building called the Sun Temple, and it's the building right there. The Incas did fantastic stonework, although at this particular site, only a few buildings have the very best Inca stonework, what we refer to as royal or imperial style masonry. And the Sun Temple is one of the buildings that is just fantastic. A couple of other things I need to point out. For the Incas, three things were real special. One is carved bedrock, and we'll see in a minute that the stone temple includes carved bedrock. Second is access to the underworld, or caves. We're going to see in a minute that it's on top of a cave. And third is flowing water, springs or some source of flowing water. And you'll see in a minute that there are a series of 16 fountains right next to the Sun Temple. So the three very special things that are found at any Inca site. At least one of those is usually at any Inca site. Here, all three are right at the Sun Temple. It's again this building right in the center. Right there again in the center of the picture. You might notice that it has an unusual shaped wall. It's a sort of a D-shaped wall curving. There is a big sun temple in Cusco, the Coricancha, which also has a curved wall almost identical. Here from above, you can see that inside there is bedrock, carved bedrock. And you can see down at the bottom of the Sun Temple, carved bedrock. This is natural stone below. You can hardly tell the difference where the natural stone ends and the Inca construction begins. Natural stone below and the Inca wall up above. Notice also windows. We've got one window there and a window there. The one we just saw was over here on the left, and we've got one on the right. Two different windows for the Sun Temple. There's one of the windows. This one is the one that faces to the southeast. Notice the projecting stones also on the four corners of the window. There's the window that faces to the northeast. The window to the southeast would be on the right-hand side of the Sun Temple. There's the one to the northeast. The other one over here faces to the southeast. and we've got the carved bedrock inside. Northeast window, southeast window. I've never been to Machu Picchu at sunrise on the solstice. The winter solstice here would be June 20th or 21st. Closest I've been is June 13th, and this is the sun coming up on the winter solstice. We're in the southern hemisphere, remember. This is one from the web of sunrise on the winter solstice. Remember that window there. What would happen if you tied string from one corner to the opposite bottom corner of those projecting stones? I might point out here that my idea is tie some strings like that. Richard Berger, the director of the Peabody Museum, says that maybe what you would have done is had a wooden framework that was tied into those and have a plumb bob from the center of the window down, from the top center down to the center of the window. Doesn't matter whether you use Richard's argument for a plumb bob or my argument for strings tied from corner to corner, as long as you can identify the center point of the window. So what we want to think about is the center point of that window. If you can mark it either from a plumb bob hanging down from the top center or from strings, top left, bottom right, etc. So if you're inside, you'll be able to identify the center point of that window. And down here would be where the shadow of that center point would be. Okay? This is carved bedrock, and they have carved it such that you can identify when the winter solstice is marked by the shadow of the center point of the window. Again, that would be that window there, and there would be where the shadow would be. I might also point out there's another window here that faces to the southeast. The bedrock is carved, so the same sort of thing would happen if you did put a center point of that window and be able to do it there. In other words, this sun temple is an astronomical observatory. You can mark the solstice, winter solstice for sure, and probably the summer solstice from this other window via the center point of the window. Title of this talk is What's New at Machu Picchu? Last summer, a Polish team working at Machu Picchu identified another point at the site, actually on the backside of Huayna Picchu Mountain, where there is a wall with a hole through it. If you look through the hole, and it's a long sort of tubular hole so that it focuses on only a very small point on the horizon, it doesn't line up with the solstice. It lines up with the rise of the Pleiades, which is a constellation, and the Pleiades rise on the horizon at that particular point 10 days before the solstice. So they would have been able to know that we're only 10 days out from the solstice, and now we got to go to the Sun Temple 10 days from now. So we've now got even more astronomical observations at the site. So again, what we're talking about is the shadow right along that carved bedrock. Underneath the Sun Temple is a cave. Most of you who've been to Machu Picchu probably have not seen this view because there's now a rope and guards and so forth. They don't let you get close, but in the old days, and I first went to the site in 1972, used to be able to get in and walk inside this and so forth. The stonework inside is very, very good. The best, the royal, imperial-style Cusco stonework inside that cave. There are other caves at the site. In fact, there are more than 40 caves at the site. Many of the burials that Hiram Bingham found in his excavations in 1913 and 1916 were in caves around the site. Water. There's a series of 16 fountains that are adjacent to the Sun Temple. They run down through. There's a spring about a half-mile away, canals that bring water from that spring into these fountains. Again, the stonework is very, very good, Cusco or imperial-style stonework. And they still work today. Oh, they're actually carried in a plastic tube most of that half mile. There's another building that I want to talk about briefly, and that's a building or a spot called the Inti Wattana. It's one of the high points of the site, and it's located right there. Inti Wattana means the hitching post to the sun in Quechua, the Inca language. And what one of the reasons why Hiram Bingham thought that Machu Picchu was the last refuge of the Incas is that it had an Inti Wattana. We know that in the 1500s, the late 1500s and early 1600s, the Spanish in Peru carried out a series of campaigns that they call the campaigns to extirpate idolatry. That is to, in essence, eliminate the pagan Inca religion. And every place where they found a hitching post of the sun or an Inti Wattana, they destroyed it. If you go to the site of Pisac near Cusco, there's a little nubbin of an Inti Wattana, but it was knocked off by the Spanish. Here, he found an Inti Wattana that was intact, that was never destroyed by the Spanish. It's on this spot over here, or right in there.
Wait a second. Can you get the light off, please? They can't see on the streaming. Thank you.
You want a little bit more light?
Light off.
Oh, light. Do you want all the lights off? One more?
Well, it's not letting me turn them on.
There we are. How's that? That's the Inti Wattana. It's a little nubbin of rock that sticks up about almost a meter. And Hiram Bingham used the presence of that Inti Wattana to suggest the Spanish never were at Machu Picchu. There it is. I have to tell a little story here. This is one of my favorite pictures of the Inti Wattana. It's kind of eerie, that eerie mist there, so forth. And there oftentimes is at Machu Picchu an eerie mist covering the site. You have to wait a little while and it usually blows off and so forth. But this was in May of 1982. And in the old days, when there weren't so many people going to Machu Picchu, the grasses in the rainy season is from November to about March or early April. The grasses would grow up. They would be big high grasses covering the terraces. And at the end of the rainy season, the guards, the workers at the site used to clean the terraces, cut down the grass. They would pile them up. They would leave these grasses to dry out. And at 5 o'clock, when the site closes, they would blow whistles. They would herd the tourists out. And as they would walk through the site, herding people ahead of them, the guards would light those piles of grass on fire. My strategy has always been to be the farthest possible point at close to 5 o'clock, so you spend the longest time after 5 o'clock in there. And that year I was on one of the terraces up at the upper part of the site with a Japanese film crew below me. They were going to film sunset. And then all of a sudden the guards start lighting these piles of grass on fire, and the site is being covered not by eerie mist, but by smoke from burning grass. I don't know a word of Japanese, but I can tell you I think I know what this Japanese film crew was saying. There it is. And so Hiram Bingham's argument that this was never discovered by the Spanish and therefore must have been the royal last refuge of the Incas was partly premised on the idea that the Inti Wattana was never damaged, never destroyed. Notice the chip. Never damaged, never destroyed, until September of 2000. My wife and I happened to be there in early 2000, and we got to the site, we were walking around, and I said, "There's a chip on the Inti Wattana," and the guard said, "No, there isn't." And I said, "Yes, there is. I know the site. That's never been there before." What actually happened, and this is a picture taken from Mariana's book, a Peruvian film crew, happily not an American film crew, Peruvian film crew was filming a beer commercial, and they were going to do a 360 revolve around the Inti Wattana with the camera. It's on a big boom, and it collapsed, and it chipped the Inti Wattana. Big scandal. The president of the Peru at the time had to fly up and check things out, and then actually some people were thrown in jail for a little while, and it was a big scandal. Here it is just a year later, and it has gotten better, and here just 6 years later it has weathered to the point where you don't even see it. And I'll point out in a few minutes that you don't see it anyway, but I'll tell you why that is. I first went to Machu Picchu in 1972, and there were just a couple hundred people there on any given day. I don't have good statistics for the early years, but by the mid-1980s, there were maybe 30,000 people visiting the site every year. Early 1990s, maybe 70,000, it doubled. And then we have some pretty good figures year by year after that. 94, about 100,000. 96, 250,000. 98, under 300,000. 2000, over 300,000. 2002, over 300,000. 2004, over 450,000. 2005, over 500,000. 2006, almost 700,000. 2007, 800,000. 2008, 858,000. No good statistics after 2008. The reason for that, I'll mention in a minute here. I did pick up some good figures for last year, and in the months of July and August last year, over 100,000 people visited in those 2 months. Now, if you figure those are 30, 31-day months and divide 30 into 100,000, it comes out as well over 3,000 people per day. These days, you have to have a ticket in advance, and you need to get a ticket actually literally now months in advance, because UNESCO says there can't be more than 2,500 people per day. And since 2008, the Instituto Nacional de Cultura, or what is now the Ministry of Culture, has said no more than 2,500 tickets will be sold. If you don't have a ticket in advance, you're not going to get in. But what they've been doing is they've been selling 2,500 tickets to get into Machu Picchu, and they've been selling 500 tickets to go hike the Inca Trail, which don't count in the 2,500. And they sell 400 tickets to climb to the top of Machu Picchu, or to Huayna Picchu Mountain, which are not included in just the regular ticket. And they sell 100 tickets to climb Machu Picchu Mountain, which probably only 10 people do. But if you're desperate to get to the site, you're willing to pay the extra to climb the Machu Picchu Mountain if you didn't have a ticket in advance. So you add all those things together, and it's about 3,500 people visiting the site every day, even though UNESCO says no more than 2,500. And a couple months ago, the Ministry of Tourism, which is not connected to the Ministry of Culture, announced that there were over 2 million people visiting Machu Picchu in 2012. In 2013, probably more than that. So the numbers are up and up and up. And one of the problems with that is that you've got too many people visiting the site. And what does that mean? I've been there when it takes a half an hour to get in the gate. The lines just to get into the site. And the more important places, this is a plaza that has temples on 3 sides of it, up to the Inti Wattana, by the Sun Temple and so forth. More and more today, actually when I was there in April last year, I was there twice in September for multiple days each time, and in October for 2 days, and in November for 2 days. Between April and October, November, they have now restricted access to even more parts of the site. They're controlling how you can go around. My bet is that within just a few years, there will be only one way that you can walk through the site. You've got to do it. You can't go into the site on your own today. You have to have a guide, so forth. So this is actually a guy down here who is controlling access up to the Inti Wattana. He's like a traffic cop, letting people up the stairs there. And any place where there's restricted access, a stairway, an entry or something, you just get crowds and crowds and crowds of people. This is climbing up towards the Inti Wattana. This is around the Inti Wattana, and it's 2006. Or again, 2006, there's the Inti Wattana. Actually, now you cannot do this. And I mentioned a minute ago, you can't see the chip on the backside of the Inti Wattana, because now you only can pass by on one side. They no longer let you walk around all sides of it. If you go online, do a Google search for Machu Picchu, you'll find well over 1 million hits. And about half of those are New Age. Machu Picchu is viewed as one of these power centers of the world. People think that the Inti Wattana has some special power. People want to touch it. You no longer can do that. Want to get your hand as close as you can. We used to see people up there humming sending power one way and then send power the other way. If you want to climb Huayna Picchu, you have to have a ticket well in advance. They only allow 400 people to climb it. In fact, now, September, October, November, they were limiting 200 people in the first climb between 7 in the morning and 10 in the morning, and then 200 more people could climb it between 10 and 1. It is not an easy climb. There are some places where you have to use ropes, and it's fairly steep. How do you get to Machu Picchu? Well, one way is to hike the Inca Trail. There are actually now several different versions of the hike, either 4 nights. There is a 5-night trail version. There's actually one that's only 1 night. You have to have your tickets way, way in advance. If you want to go in 2013 or 2014, it's probably too late unless you're willing to pay a very high price, because some of the tour companies just buy the tickets way in advance. Porters carry all your gear. You just have to carry a little day pack. And I have to tell you, we've never done hiking the Inca Trail. We've done many times hiking the last part of the Inca Trail. You used to be able to go to Machu Picchu, then hike back to the last camping spot where the last night is spent, a site called Huayna, and you could do that as a day hike. They no longer let you do that. But we've never had the time. To hike the Inca Trail, again, typically 4 or 5 days, you need to acclimate to the altitude for at least 3 or 4, preferably a week. And we just haven't had the time to do that. But this is along the Inca Trail, the part that we have done, which we've done a number of times, the last part, leading up to the Sun Gate. And you can also, if you just go to the site, you can hike up to the Sun Gate. It's only about an hour hike up and less than that hiking back down. That's on the trail up to the Sun Gate. And again, you get a really nice view of the site from there. How many people hike the trail? Well, back in the 80s, just a few thousand. And then as we go along, the numbers get bigger and bigger. And by 2006, the numbers are up near the maximum. Again, think in terms of a max of 500 people per day, 11 months of the year. They close the trail in February always because of heavy rains and for trail maintenance. So if you figure 11 months and 500 a day, the max would be somewhere around 170,000 or so, and in recent years they've come close to that kind of number. You can also go by train. In fact, most of the visitors go by train. There are a number of different trains. This is one called the Hiram Bingham, very expensive train, I think something like $600 or $700. Most people take cheaper trains. One called the Vista Dome runs about $60 or $70 from the town of Ollantaytambo. When you get off the train, you get on a bus, and then you take the bus up to the site via that road. A few little zigzags. I was lecturing on a cruise ship in February around southern South America, Chile to Argentina, and many of the people on the cruise ship, 300 of them had done Machu Picchu before they got on the cruise ship, and they had problems because there had been a big boulder that had fallen off this hill and had blocked the road, and they had to get out and walk partway up because the road was closed. Literally in the rainy season, the train can be stopped, the buses can be stopped by landslides, very, very common. Here we're on the bus, we crossed the river, Urubamba River. I actually have better video that I was working on last week of in October and November. I shot more video and just didn't have a chance to do it. This one jumps around a little bit. The road is narrow.
Drive fast.
So this is the only traffic on that road, right?
Yeah.
The buses going up and down.
The bus is going up, but it's a two-way road.
Is this part of the Inca Trail, or was
No,
this built for?
no, this was built in 1948. It's called the Hiram Bingham Highway. Prior to that, you had to use mules. And what's exciting is when you come around a turn, and there's another bus.
Okay, you go sit in the front, I'll sit back.
You line up to get on the bus, you get whatever seat that's left when you get on.
All right.
But it's about a 25-minute ride up and down. And when you get off the bus at the top, you're right at the site. And right at the site, there's a hotel, this hotel over here. First time we stayed there was in 1980. I had 4 students with me, and $25 per night for the 5 of us. We stayed, I think, 3 or 4 nights. It's run by Orient Express. It used to be a government hotel. It used to be 16 rooms. It's now about 30, 31 rooms. And it is not as nice inside as a Motel 6. It is not very fancy. It does have a bar. It does have a restaurant. Let's see what it costs to stay there. 2005, it cost almost $500 for a single, more than $500 for a double. 2006, double, $825. 2007, $885. 2008, $965 per night. I should tell you, meals are included. Taxes, 18%, are extra. 2009, $1,372 for a double with the view. There are, I think, 4 rooms that you can actually see the site from. 2010, $1,400 for a double with a view. You all do want doubles with views, I presume. And I'm not even giving you the price for a suite. One of the last times we stayed there, actually, I think it was 2000, we were comped a suite by Orient Express, which was very, very nice. And I don't have the most recent prices, but I was on the line when we were in Louisville over the weekend, and I think the price for a double without a view is no more than this. I think it's like $1,135. And if you go during the rainy season, you can probably get one for about $800. They have discounts in the rainy season, but in the high season from May through September, October, it's not inexpensive. And I should tell you, down in Aguascalientes, down in the town down below where you get the bus, there are hotels from 1 star to 5 stars. We've been staying on the tours that I run at a hotel called the Inca Terra, which is actually much, much nicer than the one up above. The only disadvantage, it's not up above. One of the other things about Machu Picchu is that the people down in Aguascalientes are not really happy with things, how they're run. They feel that they ought to get more from Machu Picchu. If people are paying a ticket price that's over $50 per day, first time I went it was $2 a day, and even in the 80s it was only $5 or $10 a day. Now it's $52. Bus ride is $17 up and down, so it's about $70 to get up and get down and go in. So the people up there will sometimes go on strike, and it's very easy for them to put a couple of big boulders on the railroad tracks, and that shuts down the train, and you're screwed. You have 1 day to visit Machu Picchu, and you can't get there. If you watch the news and so forth, a couple times a year, sometimes once a month or so, Machu Picchu is closed, either by landslides, the train being closed for one reason or another, or from strikes. There were strikes last week in Cusco that shut off Machu Picchu. Back to the book, Mariana Pisa's book that started the fight to get the stuff to come back. When she wrote that book, the intent was to try to get the stuff back to by 2011 for the 100th anniversary. And she basically went about it wrong. She got a group of people together to sue the U.S. ambassador, the U.S. government in Lima, in Peruvian courts. Of course, the stuff was at Yale University, and that wasn't going to go anywhere. Now, we happened to have had a friend at that time, early 2000s, who knew what she ought to do. And I actually arranged a dinner between my friend and Mariana to work out a better strategy on how to get the stuff back. Our friend was the U.S. ambassador. And he said to her, basically point blank, you can't sue me, I'm a diplomat, and the stuff isn't in Peru, and therefore suing it here isn't going to do anything. You got to sue in the United States. And the strategy did change. They then went to the U.S. courts in Washington, D.C., and the courts in Washington, D.C., we don't have any power because the stuff is in Connecticut. They then went to the federal court in Connecticut and filed suit. And by 2006, they were talking that it might come back. And they were insisting that the stuff should be repatriated and so forth. One thing that was important was the man on the left was Alejandro Toledo, Peru's first indigenous president. And his wife, Elena Karp, was a graduate of Yale University. And he met with this guy on the right, who also was a graduate of Yale University. And they kind of put pressure. And by 2007, Yale University confirmed that the stuff was going to go back. Then the argument started on what was to go back. How much was there? And there were some realistic problems. Peru would say, we think that there are 100 pieces in the catalog related to this particular object. And Yale University would say, we took those 100 pieces and we assembled them into one pot, and now that is one. Is it 1 or 100? And so the number of pieces that were in the collection was hard to say. But pressure kept going on. This is 2010, just literally a year before the anniversary, and the pressure got even more and more. Here, the man in the center is the president of Peru at that time, Alan Garcia, and he was putting pressure on Yale to get the stuff back. And ultimately, the first set of materials, the first crates of materials, did get to Peru in time for the July 2011 anniversary. And since then, the rest of the material, most of the rest of the material has gotten back to Peru. A small collection has remained at Yale Peabody Museum for study there. But they've now created a new museum in Cusco. Very, very nice museum. It's called the Casa Concha, or the Machu Picchu Museum, near downtown. It's easy to get to, not very expensive. Nobody's visiting it. The tour companies don't take you there. If you have a tour to Peru, have some free time, make sure you go to the Casa Concha Museum. You're not allowed to take any pictures inside, unfortunately, but I've known known Richard Berger, the director of the Peabody Museum, for over 35 years, and so Richard sent me these two pictures. It is a very well done museum, very, very nice inside, and lays out the story of Hiram Bingham and so forth very nicely.
Archaeologists discovered some ancient artifacts last week in Machu Picchu, world-renowned Inca city in southeast Peru. The pieces were found buried below a three-walled patio known as Wairana in Quechua. The discoveries include clay jugs, ceremonial pot, 10 malachite beads, bronze clasp, and carved stones.
This was an offering that was imported, perhaps by the Chus themselves or by the Incas. We didn't find anything else apart from these objects.
The Chimu lived on the northern coast of Peru and were later conquered by the Incas around 1470 AD.
Los Incas, como se sabe, ¿no? Ellos han llegado por
The Incas, as we know, expanded to the north of the American continent, to the south, to the jungle, and also to the sea. They had a policy of both integration and expansion, and managed in some way or another to conquer other peoples, whether it was done peacefully, or in many cases, with violence.
estas culturas los han sometido de una forma pacífica en muchos casos.
Machu Picchu was rediscovered in 1911 by American explorer Hiram Bingham. It had been unknown to the outside world for over 3 centuries, but it's now one of the most famous sites in Peru.
When the material was sent back to Peru from Yale, prior to it being sent back, it was restudied. And a good friend of ours, John Verano, is a physical anthropologist from Tulane University, studied the bones. One of the things that he noted is that the shape of some of the skulls was very distinctive. And in Peru, pre-Hispanic, you can divide skull types into several different types of deformation. The North Coast is different from the South Coast and so forth. He argued, based on looking at the skulls, that perhaps a third of the skulls represented North Coast people. They also did studies of the the tooth chemistry. And when you get your adult teeth, the minerals that are in your teeth are reflective of the water that you are drinking when you are getting your adult teeth. And they've looked at that, and they do suggest that, again, based on that material, roughly a third of the bone materials from Machu Picchu are of people from the north coast. So based on this new discovery, literally a year and a half ago, of Chimu pot and some other Chimu stuff, and the bones and the teeth, there is now pretty good evidence that about a third of the population at Machu Picchu were people from the north coast of Peru. The north coast people were very good metal workers. We know that there was a metalworking area at Machu Picchu, and it's likely that when the Incas conquered the north coast between 1460 and 1470, they took some people from the north coast to Machu Picchu, set them up as craftsmen at this particular site. So, let me summarize what's new at Machu Picchu. Well, we know it wasn't the last refuge of the Incas, even though Hiram Bingham argued that it was. Clearly it wasn't. We know where that last refuge is, Vilcabamba, Vitcos, and so forth, farther to the north. It wasn't the last refuge of the chosen women. Hiram Bingham, in one publication, focused on that aspect, and clearly wasn't that. One of the reasons why he argued that was that his physical anthropologist looked at the bone material and said that roughly 90% was female. John Verano, the physical anthropologist from Tulane University, looked at the same bone material, said that Hiram Bingham's physical anthropologist used a reference collection of Northern European, North American, and African bones. Peruvian native people are smaller, lighter than North American, European, African. Therefore, when the physical anthropologist from Yale for Hiram Bingham said small bones equals females, he was wrong. The ratio is now thought to be something 60-40, females to males. And given that in the last decade or so of the Inca Empire, there was a civil war going on between two sons of the last real strong Inca king, Huáscar, or Huayna Capac, his sons Huáscar and Atahualpa were fighting. And if there's a civil war going on, many males might have been involved in that war, so having a sex ratio of 60-40 isn't surprising during wartime. There is abundant evidence to show that a sizable part of the population were from the north coast, particularly Chimu, roughly a third. And there's pretty good recent evidence of it being related to astronomy. We know from the writing that John Rowe found in Seville in Spain, and his one student, that it was a royal estate of the Inca Pachacutic, probably the greatest, the Alexander Great of the Incas, the best of the greatest of the Inca kings. And we know now that the stuff has gotten back to Peru. That big debate that went on for 10 years is now over. The last thing, what was it? If it wasn't all these other things. Let me give you my idea of what it is, and there are lots of different ideas of what it might have been. The one thing that stands out is that it got terraces, a lot of terraces. Many Inca sites, particularly sites that were related to the kings, the royal estates, have lots of terraces. And we know that the Inca king participated in various agricultural rituals. Around 1910, a book was found in an archive in Copenhagen, in Denmark. And it was a book, it was actually a letter, but it was over 1,000 pages, so we'd call it a book. It was written by a man named Felipe Huaman Poma de Ayala. And in his book, he illustrated it with more than 100 diagrams. I love the diagrams. I used them when I was teaching, used a lot of his diagrams. In this particular diagram from Huaman Poma, what we have is the Inca king, and we know this is the king because he has a royal fringe headdress, and he has fancy ear spools and a fancy costume, and he's talking to the Yama. He's saying "Yi Yi," which is what Yamas always say, just as he's about to sacrifice the Yama. Divination through the entrails of the Yama. But at many of the Inca sites, particularly royal sites, there were lots of terraces. This is Pisac. Here's a real nice site called Marai near Cusco, a series of circular terraces. There's an on-the-ground shot from Marai. And we know that the Incas did rituals all the time. Still today, people do agricultural rituals. The first cleaning of the acequia, first cleaning of the irrigation canal. We were in a valley called the Colca Valley south of Cusco a couple years ago, and we saw people going out. Notice they're dressed in their fancy costumes. These are not just their work clothes. They're dressed up, they're going out, they're going to have a big party and clean the irrigation canal, do the ritual cleaning of the irrigation canal. These are the people heading out. I didn't take this particular photo. I'm not that old. This was a German ethnographer by the name of Henry Bruning, 1908. It is in the north coast of Peru, but what the description on this photo is that it's a group of men at the end of the day, after they have done the ritual cleaning of the irrigation canal, they're standing around getting drunk. In Inca and Peru today, when you have a various ritual, part of the ritual is almost always you're going to get drunk. You do something and you get something. There's reciprocity. And you do something like clean the irrigation canal and you get drunk. So here's another drawing from Wamapoma. This is the Inca. He's the first guy here. He's got his royal fringe. He's got his ear spool, his fancy dress. They're using a tool called a chaquitakla, a foot plow. And a group of men, they're other high status Inca nobles. They're doing the first turning of the soil, getting the soil prepared for planting. The two women in front here are helping out with the planting. The woman behind, what does she have? She's got cups with chicha, the Inca corn beer. And they will do their plowing and then she'll get them drunk. Now, a friend of mine, Dan Gade, emeritus professor at the University of Vermont, wrote a book a couple years ago. There's Dan. And it's called Nature and Culture in the Andes. Very nice book. It's a collection of some of Dan's writings. One of the chapters in that is called The Valleys of Mystery on the Peruvian Jungle Origin and Inca-Coca Connection. In that chapter, and as well as other writings that he's done, Dan points out that the Incas were absolutely dependent on coca. It was a leaf from a plant, and here's the plant, that they chewed. It gave them extra strength. It gave them some immunity from frostbite. It increases blood flow in the extremities, so your ears, your fingers, toes don't get frostbite. It relaxes you and so forth. It does a lot of nice things. It's from what we get cocaine these days, but chewing it, you're not really getting much in the way of cocaine. But the Incas really used a lot of coca. They depended on it. It was important for them, ritual use and so forth. But they were also absolutely paranoid about growing it. And the problem is that it grows typically at an elevation of around 3,000, 4,000 foot elevation in the eastern valleys of Peru, on the eastern side of the Andes. And you can go to Peru today and you can get coca. If you go to one of the fancy hotels, you'll get coca tea. Go to any of the restaurants, you can get coca tea. Helps to ameliorate the effects of altitude and so forth. But the problem is that in the places where coca grows best, there's a disease. In Peru, it's called uta. The technical term for it is leishmaniasis. It is very much like leprosy or cancer. You are bitten by a sand fly, a very small little bug, and at the elevations where coca grows best, that sand fly carries this disease. And so what the Incas did was they would send people down in labor gangs, but for only a week or two into the coca growing areas, because that would reduce the risk of somebody getting bitten and so forth. So you constantly send people down, but only for a short period of time. You're bitten places where the sandfly is going to get you, ears, nose, lips, and so forth, and it's like leprosy or cancer. It really is very bad. With modern antibiotics, it's not much of a problem. It's found in various parts of the world. In fact, our soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan have had to deal with leishmaniasis over there. But the Incas were absolutely paranoid about getting this disease. And the question I have for you is that if you were the Inca, the king, would you want to go and do your agricultural ritual someplace where you have that risk? And I don't think you would. So what you might want to do is find a place where coca might grow, but that does not have the disease. And going down the Urubamba Valley, Machu Picchu is the first place where you can grow coca. So I think that Machu Picchu may have been a ritual coca growing spot where the king could come and do those necessary rituals and not be exposed to it. Then what happened? Well, after 1532, there's no Inca king. He's gone. We have 200 or 300 people living there. Think of them as the hotel staff. Every once in a while, the king would come, do his rituals, go back to Cusco. And 200 or 300 people sit around preparing things, building more buildings, etc. And then one day, the Inca king doesn't come. And they wait around the next year and the next year and the next year. The Inca king doesn't come. A third of them are from the north coast, and they say, well, let's go home. And so the place is abandoned. And in 1911, Hiram Bingham discovers it. If you have questions about going to Peru, you can always email me. I'm quite willing to answer that. Just find my email, just look for my name, or check out, we have a website. And I've also got some brochures up here if anybody's interested on the Archaeological Institute of America trips that we've got in September. Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
There's a Temple of the Moon there.
The Temple of the Moon is up on the backside of Huayna Picchu.
Anything unusual?
No, nothing special.
On the north coast, you have all that pottery with amputations, the Chico pottery.
Yeah.
There, it was another kind of disease.
Well, no, most of that's moche pottery earlier,
Okay.
but the moche is the famous pottery.
At the ankles and the
Yeah,
knees.
yeah.
What was the disease?
Probably not a disease. Those may be people that did something wrong or were being sacrificed in a particular way. For example, in a high-status burial, you would cut off the feet of some people and put them in so they couldn't run away. The very fancy, the first of the main tombs at Sipan had a guardian with no feet above the main tomb. So those may not have been anything because of disease or anything. They may have just been, but you can see a lot of diseases in moche pottery. You can see something like leprosy or uta. You can see they're clearly blind. There's a very, very nice new book by a fellow named Steve Bourget on moche pottery that gets into some of the esoteric stuff on it.